The bitter February wind swept across the barren plains of Colorado Territory as Rachel Flannery clutched her threadbare coat tighter around her shivering frame. The locomotive had thundered away, leaving nothing but a cloud of steam and coal smoke in its wake as she stared at the weathered sign swinging in the wind. Silverton. This wasn't Circleville, Ohio, not even close. She was nearly 1,000 miles from her intended destination, with night falling and no other trains scheduled for days. Rachel fought back tears of frustration as she surveyed the ramshackle mining town before her. The year was 1878, and she had spent her last dollars on this ill-fated journey west to start a new life as a schoolteacher. Her letter of employment, crumpled in her pocket, would mean nothing here in this rough-hewn outpost. "Madam, you look about as lost as a jackrabbit in a wolf den," came a deep voice behind her. Rachel spun around, her hand instinctively clutching her small valise closer. The man before her stood tall against the darkening sky, his broad shoulders draped in a worn leather duster. Dust caked his boots, and the brim of his hat cast shadows across eyes that seemed to catch what little light remained in the day. "The train," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "It was supposed to stop at Circleville, Ohio. I fell asleep and they must have misunderstood when I purchased my ticket." The man's weathered face crinkled slightly at the corners of his eyes. "Ohio? Madam, you're about as far from Ohio as a person could be without hitting the Pacific." He extended a calloused hand. "Wade Valentine. I run the cattle operation north of town." "Rachel Flannery," she replied, hesitantly accepting his handshake. "And I'm well aware of how far I am from where I ought to be, Mr. Valentine." Wade glanced at the empty tracks, then back to the young woman's determined face. "There are no mistakes in love, Miss Flannery." Rachel blinked in confusion. "I beg your pardon? Just something my ma used to say. Means sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as its worst mishaps." He gestured toward the town's single street. "Let's get you somewhere warm while we figure out your predicament. The mining season's just starting up, so the town's not as rough as it could be, but it's no place for a lady alone at nightfall." As they walked toward the glow of lanterns that marked Silverton's main street, Rachel couldn't help but notice the curious glances cast their way. Women were scarce in these parts, and a proper-looking Eastern lady even more so. "Do you have family in Circleville?" Wade asked, slowing his long stride to match hers. "No," Rachel admitted. "I was traveling for a teaching position. I've no family left since the fever took my parents last year." She didn't add that their mounting medical debts had forced her to sell their modest home in Pittsburgh, leaving her with nothing but her education and determination. Wade nodded thoughtfully. "Silverton's got no proper school yet, though there's talk of starting one. 30 or so children running wild as mustangs, driving their mothers to distraction." Hope flickered briefly in Rachel's chest before reality doused it. "I have no means to stay here. The train fare back east would cost more than I possess." The admission stung her pride, but practicality demanded honesty. They reached a 2-story building with a neatly painted sign reading, "Miners' Rest Hotel and Dining." Wade pushed open the door, and warm air rushed out to greet them. "Hattie!" He called to a stout woman arranging glasses behind a small bar. "Got a lady here who needs lodging for the night." The woman turned, her eyebrows rising at the sight of Rachel in her travel-worn but clearly Eastern attire. "Well now, ain't you a sight for sore eyes in this dusty town? Room's $2, includes breakfast." Rachel's heart sank. She had exactly $1.47 to her name. "Put it on my account," Wade said before she could speak, "and send up a hot meal." "Mr. Valentine, I couldn't possibly," Rachel began. "Consider it a loan, Miss Flannery," he interrupted. "We'll sort out the details tomorrow after you've rested." Rachel wanted to refuse, her pride rebelling against charity, but exhaustion and hunger won out. "I will repay you, sir. I'm not in the habit of accepting handouts." Something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Never thought you were, madam. Silverton might just need a schoolteacher with your kind of spirit." As Hattie led her upstairs to a small but clean room, Rachel couldn't shake Wade Valentine's words from her mind. "There are no mistakes in love." What an odd thing to say to a complete stranger. Yet as she sank onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, she wondered if perhaps fate had played a strange hand in her misfortune. Morning brought clarity and determination. Rachel splashed cold water on her face from the basin, arranged her chestnut hair in a simple but tidy bun, and donned her second-best dress, navy blue wool with modest white trim. If she was to find a way out of this predicament, she would do so with dignity and tact. Hattie greeted her with strong coffee and a generous plate of eggs and bacon. "Mr. Valentine said to tell you he'd return midday. Got business at the assay office this morning." Rachel nodded her thanks, stomach growling at the sight of food. "Mrs. Just Hattie, dear. Lost my husband to the mines 3 years back. Run this place on my own since." "Hattie, then. I wonder if you might know of any work available in town? I find myself in need of employment, at least until I can arrange passage back east." The older woman settled into the chair across from Rachel, eyeing her thoughtfully. "What skills you got, besides that fine Eastern education written all over you?" "I'm a certified teacher," Rachel replied, straightening her shoulders. "I can also sew, keep accounts, and I'm a quick study at most practical matters." Hattie drummed her fingers on the table. "Milliner's shop might need help. Mrs. Carson broke her wrist last week. And Doc Jenkins is always looking for someone with neat handwriting to help with his records." She paused. "Course, this town really does need a proper teacher. 15 families with school-age young uns, and more minors bringing families now that the silver's proving steady." "Mr. Valentine mentioned something similar," Rachel admitted. "But starting a school requires resources I don't possess." "Wade Valentine's got more resources than most in these parts," Hattie said with a knowing look. "Man owns the largest cattle spread in the county and holds stakes in 3 profitable mines. If he's taken an interest in your predicament, you might just find yourself with options." Rachel felt her cheeks warm. He was merely being charitable to a stranded traveler. Hattie's laugh was warm and knowing. "Wade Valentine doesn't do charity, dear. Everything that man does has purpose. Been watching him build his empire for 8 years. Ever since he rode into town with nothing but determination and a knack for seeing value where others didn't." Before Rachel could formulate a response, the door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cold air and 3 men in mining clothes. Hattie excused herself to attend to them, leaving Rachel to ponder her situation over the remains of her breakfast. By midday, Rachel had toured the small town, introducing herself to shopkeepers and inquiring about temporary employment. Most were polite but unhelpful. Silverton had few jobs suitable for a genteel Eastern lady. The exception was kindly Dr. Jenkins, who offered her 2 hours of work each afternoon organizing his medical records, barely enough to cover meals, let alone lodging and saving for train fare. She was leaving the doctor's small office when she spotted Wade Valentine riding into town on a magnificent chestnut stallion. He cut an impressive figure astride the powerful animal, his broad shoulders set straight beneath his duster. Several townspeople called greetings, which he answered with familiar nods. Rachel smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of her appearance. She'd rehearsed a speech about repayment terms, determined to establish a businesslike arrangement rather than remain in his debt. Wade spotted her and tipped his hat before dismounting with fluid grace that belied his size. He tied his horse to the hitching post and approached her with long, confident strides. "Miss Flannery, I trust you rested well." "Yes, thank you," she replied. "Mr. Valentine, I've secured some work with Dr. Jenkins, organizing his records. It's not much, but it will allow me to begin repaying your kindness while I determine my next steps. Something flickered in his eyes' amusement. Perhaps? I admire your industry, but I've a proposition that might interest you more. He gestured toward a small cafe. Would you join me for lunch while we discuss it? Curiosity overrode caution. Very well, Mr. Valentine. Inside the cafe, a bell tinkled as they entered. The proprietor, a wiry man with an impressive mustache, hurried to seat them at the best table by the window. Rachel noted how quickly they were served. Clearly, Wade Valentine commanded respect in Silverton. I've spoken with several families this morning. Wade began after they'd been served steaming bowls of stew. There's considerable interest in establishing a proper school. The town council has an unused building that could serve the purpose, and families are willing to contribute toward a teacher's salary. Rachel's spoon paused midway to her mouth. You've arranged all this since yesterday evening? Wade's mouth curved slightly. Silverton's been needing a school for some time. Your arrival merely accelerated plans already in motion. And you believe I should abandon my position in Circleville to teach here instead? The idea was simultaneously preposterous and oddly appealing. The way I see it, Miss Flannery, fate has presented both you and Silverton with an opportunity. Our children need education, and you need a fresh start. You know nothing about me, Rachel protested, though without heat. I know you traveled alone across the country for a teaching position, which tells me you're independent and courageous. I know you immediately sought employment rather than bemoaning your situation, which speaks to your practical nature. And I know from watching you interact with townspeople this morning that you carry yourself with dignity and kindness. His gaze held hers steadily. Am I mistaken in these observations? Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. You've been watching me? Silverton isn't large, Miss Flannery, and new arrivals are noteworthy, especially those with your particular qualities. Before she could demand clarification of that ambiguous statement, he continued. The council can offer $40 monthly, plus the small house behind the schoolhouse. It needs work, but it's sound and private. $40 monthly was more than she would have earned in Circleville. And her own house, however humble, represented independence she hadn't dared hope for. Why are you doing this, Mr. Valentine? She asked, studying his weathered face. You don't know me. I could be a terrible teacher. His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine. Are you? No, she admitted. I'm actually quite good. But that's beside the point. Is it? Silverton needs what you can provide. As for why I'm involved. He paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. Let's just say I believe in building community. A proper school means more families will settle, bringing stability and growth. It made logical sense, yet Rachel sensed he wasn't revealing everything. Still, the offer was too good to dismiss out of hand. I would need to see the building and accommodations before making any decision, she said cautiously. Of course, I'll show you after lunch. He broke a piece of cornbread, his movements deliberate. There's something else you should consider, Miss Flannery. Silverton is growing, but it's still rough around the edges. Not all the amenities you're accustomed to in the East. Winters are harsh, and while most folks are decent, there are elements that aren't. A single woman living alone takes on certain risks. Rachel stiffened. If you're suggesting I'm too delicate for frontier life, not at all, he interrupted. Just ensuring you have facts to make an informed choice. I suspect you're made of sterner stuff than many give you credit for. The assessment was surprisingly accurate. Throughout her life, people had underestimated her resilience, seeing only her proper manners and delicate features rather than the determined spirit beneath. After lunch, Wade escorted her to a sturdy log structure at the edge of town. The schoolhouse was simple but well built, with large windows for light and a pot-bellied stove for heat. The attached living quarters were smaller than she'd imagined, just 2 rooms plus a lean-to kitchen but clean and private. "It needs a woman's touch," Wade acknowledged as they surveyed the sparse furnishings. "But the town ladies would help outfit it properly if you decide to stay. They're eager for their children to have proper schooling." As if to emphasize his point, a young woman approached, 2 small children in tow. She introduced herself as Martha Wilson, wife of the blacksmith. "Miss Flannery, we're so pleased to meet you," she gushed. "My James and little Sarah are bright children, but they need proper education. We've all been hoping and praying for a real teacher." The sincerity in Martha's eyes stirred something in Rachel's heart. Here was real need, children hungry for knowledge that she could provide. "How many students would there be?" Rachel asked. 28 that I know of, ages 5 to 15, Martha replied. "Plus a few older boys who work the mines but might attend evening classes to learn their letters." By the time they'd toured the building and spoken with several more eager parents, Rachel found herself warming to the idea of staying. The practical difficulties remained. She had no supplies, no curriculum materials, not even a proper change of clothes, but these were surmountable problems. "I'll need time to consider," she told Wade as they walked back toward the hotel. "It's a significant change from my plans." "Take all the time you need," he replied, "though the council hopes to make a decision within the week." That evening, Rachel sat in her hotel room, weighing options. Returning east meant starting over, seeking another position with no guarantee of success. Staying meant building something from nothing in a rough frontier town, far from everything familiar. As dawn broke the next morning, she made her decision. She would stay at least through the spring term. If it proved unsuitable, she could reconsider when the mountain passes cleared in summer. The next weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Rachel moved into the small house behind the schoolhouse, which the town ladies had indeed helped furnish with donated items. Wade Valentine contributed a handsome bookshelf and desk for the classroom, plus lumber to build proper student benches. Rachel couldn't help but notice he often found reasons to stop by as preparations progressed, offering assistance or simply checking on her welfare. "You've accomplished much in a short time," he remarked one afternoon, surveying the transformed classroom. Alphabet charts adorned the walls, and neatly arranged desks awaited students. "The community has been remarkably supportive," Rachel acknowledged. "I've never experienced such enthusiasm for education. Folks here understand its value precisely because it's been scarce," Wade said. "Many never had the opportunity themselves." Rachel studied him curiously. "And you, Mr. Valentine? Where did you receive your education? Your speech and manner suggest more formal schooling than most in these parts." Something like caution flickered in his eyes. "My mother insisted on proper schooling, despite our circumstances. She was determined her son would have opportunities." Before Rachel could inquire further, Martha Wilson arrived with a basket of fresh bread and preserves, effectively ending their private conversation. School commenced the following Monday with 26 eager students. Rachel quickly established routines and assessment levels, grouping children by ability rather than age. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying. These children hungered for knowledge in ways her Eastern pupils never had. Wade continued his regular visits, sometimes bringing supplies or building materials for ongoing improvements, sometimes simply observing classes. Rachel found herself looking forward to these encounters, though she carefully maintained professional boundaries. A schoolteacher's reputation was her most valuable asset, particularly in a small community. Late one Friday afternoon, nearly a month after her arrival, Rachel was erasing the chalkboard when Wade appeared in the doorway. "Miss Flannery, I wonder if I might have a word?" Something in his tone made her pause. "Of course, Mr. Valentine. Is everything all right?" He stepped fully into the classroom, removing his hat. In the slanting afternoon light, she noticed gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. "I've business in Denver next week. The stage leaves Sunday morning." He paused. "I'll be purchasing books and supplies for the school while there. I thought you might wish to accompany me, to select appropriate materials yourself." Rachel blinked in surprise. "Travel to Denver? Together? With proper chaperonage, of course," he added quickly. "Mrs. Jenkins has business there as well and has agreed to accompany us." The doctor's wife was a respected matron whose presence would indeed quell any potential gossip. Still, the invitation was unexpected. "It's very thoughtful, but the children's education would suffer from my absence," Rachel demurred. "It's only 4 days," Wade countered. "Martha Wilson and Mrs. Peterson both offered to mind the school in your absence, and the educational benefits of proper books would far outweigh a brief interruption." He was right, of course. The school desperately needed proper textbooks and materials. Working with makeshift resources had taxed her creativity. "You've already given generously to the school, Mr. Valentine," Rachel said carefully. "I wouldn't want to impose further on your kindness." Something that might have been frustration crossed his face. "It's not charity, Miss Flannery. The council has allocated funds for school supplies. I'm merely facilitating their purchase." He paused, his expression softening. "And I thought you might appreciate a brief respite from your duties. You've worked tirelessly since arriving." The consideration in his voice touched her. Despite her initial reservations about Silverton, she had grown fond of the community and its rugged determination, and she had come to respect Wade Valentine's quiet integrity and commitment to the town's development. "Very well," she agreed. "If Mrs. Jenkins is amenable, I would be grateful for the opportunity." His smile transformed his face, erasing years of weathering. "Excellent. I'll make the arrangements." The stagecoach journey to Denver proved more arduous than Rachel anticipated. Spring thaws had left mountain roads muddy and treacherous, requiring passengers to disembark at steep passes to lighten the coach's load. Mrs. Jenkins, a stout woman in her 50s, maintained good humor throughout, while Wade often walked alongside the struggling horses to spare them his considerable weight. By the time they reached Denver, Rachel was exhausted but exhilarated. The growing city bustled with activity that made Silverton seem positively sleepy by comparison. Wade secured rooms at a respectable hotel adjoining chambers for the ladies, with his own across the hall, and suggested they rest before tackling their business the following day. "I had no idea Denver had grown so considerably," Rachel remarked over dinner in the hotel restaurant. "The architecture is quite impressive for a western city." "Denver's positioning as a railroad hub has accelerated its development," Wade explained. "It's becoming the commercial center for the entire region." Mrs. Jenkins nodded agreement. "When George and I first came through in '65, it was little more than a collection of saloons and trading posts. Now look at it: opera houses, banks, proper society." She cast a sly glance between Wade and Rachel. "Speaking of society, there's a spring social tomorrow evening at the Occidental Hotel. Perhaps we might attend." Wade looked to Rachel. "Would that interest you, Miss Flannery?" "After our business is concluded, of course." The prospect of music and dancing after weeks of hard work was tempting. "I'd enjoy that very much, though I'm afraid I didn't pack appropriate attire for social occasions." "That's easily remedied," Mrs. Jenkins declared. "Denver has several fine dressmakers who could alter something suitable. While Mr. Valentine conducts his business tomorrow morning, you and I shall see to proper attire." Rachel wanted to protest the extravagance, but the thought of donning something other than her 2 serviceable work dresses proved too tempting. "Very well, but something modest and practical that might serve for future school functions." Wade's eyes crinkled with amusement. "Always practical, Miss Flannery." The following day brought successful endeavors for all. Wade secured not only books for the school, but also lumber contracts for expanding Silverton's commercial buildings. Mrs. Jenkins acquired medical supplies for her husband's practice. And Rachel, to her surprise, found herself the owner of a lovely blue silk gown that the dressmaker altered to fit perfectly. "It brings out the silver in your eyes," Mrs. Jenkins declared as Rachel twirled before the mirror. "Mr. Valentine won't know what hit him." Rachel flushed. "Mrs. Jenkins, I assure you, my relationship with Mr. Valentine is strictly professional." The older woman's knowing smile was infuriating. "Of course, dear. I've merely observed that he calls at the schoolhouse with remarkable frequency for a man with extensive business interests." Unable to formulate a proper rebuttal, Rachel changed the subject. That evening, as Wade escorted them into the Occidental Hotel's grand ballroom, Rachel couldn't help feeling a surge of pleasure at his barely concealed admiration of her appearance. "You look beautiful, Miss Flannery," he said simply. "Thank you, Mr. Valentine." She took in his own transformation his usual frontier attire replaced by a well-tailored black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. "You clean up rather well yourself." The dance was more elegant than she'd anticipated, with a proper orchestra and refreshments served on fine china. Denver's elite mingled with successful merchants and mining investors, creating an atmosphere of wealth and ambition. Wade proved to be an accomplished dancer, guiding Rachel through waltzes and quadrilles with surprising grace for such a physically imposing man. "You dance very well for a cattle rancher," she remarked during a brief respite. "Another skill courtesy of your mother's insistence on proper education?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "My mother believed social graces were essential, regardless of circumstances." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," he agreed, his voice softening, "widowed young. She raised me alone in difficult circumstances, yet never compromised on what she believed important." Rachel sensed there was more to his story, but before she could inquire further, they were interrupted by a striking man in an expensive suit. "Valentine, by God! Didn't expect to see you in civilized company." The man's tone held thinly veiled contempt beneath surface cordiality. Wade's expression hardened. "Blackwell, still acquiring mining interests, I presume. Among other ventures, Denver offers opportunities for those with vision." Blackwell's gaze shifted to Rachel, his assessment uncomfortably invasive. "Won't you introduce me to your lovely companion?" Wade's jaw tightened. "Miss Rachel Flannery, Silverton's schoolteacher. Miss Flannery, Harrison Blackwell." "Charmed," Blackwell said, taking Rachel's hand and holding it a moment too long. "A schoolteacher? How quaint. Though I must say, you seem rather refined for frontier education." Rachel extracted her hand. "Education is never quaint, Mr. Blackwell. It's the foundation of civilization, even perhaps especially on the frontier." Blackwell's eyebrows rose at her spirited response. "Indeed. Well, I won't monopolize your time. Valentine, we should discuss the Silverton situation while you're in town." "My office, tomorrow? I have no business with you regarding Silverton or anything else." "Blackwell," Wade replied coldly. After Blackwell departed, Rachel turned to Wade. "What was that about? He seemed to particularly dislike you." Wade's expression remained grim. "Blackwell represents Eastern investors who acquire struggling mining operations at discount prices, often through questionable tactics. He's currently trying to gain control of several mines near Silverton." "And you oppose this?" "I oppose his methods and what they would mean for the town. Blackwell's investors care nothing for sustainable development or the welfare of miners and their families. They extract maximum profit, then abandon operations when returns diminish, leaving communities devastated." His passion for Silverton's welfare impressed her, though she sensed the animosity between the men ran deeper than business disagreements. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics as the evening progressed, but Rachel noted how Wade's gaze occasionally tracked Blackwell across the room, his expression vigilant. The remainder of their Denver sojourn passed pleasantly, culminating in the purchase of an impressive array of educational materials that required an additional freight wagon for transport back to Silverton. Rachel found herself reluctant to leave the comforts of city life, yet equally eager to return to her students and the community that had so quickly claimed her loyalty. The return journey proved more perilous than their outbound trip. Spring storms had washed out sections of the mountain roads, forcing detours that added hours to their travel time. Mrs. Jenkins bore the discomfort stoically, but by the second day, Rachel could see the older woman was suffering. "We should stop at the next way station," she suggested to Wade during a brief halt to rest the horses. "Mrs. Jenkins needs proper rest." Wade glanced at the darkening sky. "I had the same thought. There's a decent stopping place about 5 miles ahead. We'll overnight there and continue at first light." The way station proved basic but clean, a sturdy log structure offering hot meals and sleeping quarters for travelers. After ensuring the ladies were comfortably settled in the small room reserved for female passengers, Wade joined the other male travelers in the common bunkroom. Morning brought clear skies but troubling news. During breakfast, the station manager informed travelers that a bridge ahead had been damaged in the recent storms. "Passable for horses and light rigs," he explained, "but heavy wagons will need to wait until repairs are completed, likely 2 or 3 days. Wade considered this information. "Mrs. Jenkins, I believe you should continue by stagecoach. Your husband will be concerned if you're delayed further. Miss Flannery and I will follow with the supply wagon once the bridge is repaired." Mrs. Jenkins frowned. "That hardly seems proper, Mr. Valentine. Miss Flannery's reputation would be equally compromised by remaining here at this way station for several days in mixed company," Wade pointed out reasonably. "The stage driver and passengers provide adequate chaperonage for your journey, and will travel directly to Silverton once the bridge is safe." Rachel considered the options. Continuing with Mrs. Jenkins meant abandoning the educational supplies they'd worked so hard to acquire. Remaining with Wade might raise eyebrows, but they would be traveling in daylight on the public road. "I believe Mr. Valentine's solution is practical," she decided. "My priority must be ensuring the school supplies reach Silverton safely." Mrs. Jenkins didn't look entirely convinced, but with the stage driver calling for passengers to board, she had little choice but to accept the arrangement. "I'll explain the circumstances to the ladies of Silverton," she promised Rachel. "Though you should prepare for some wagging tongues regardless." After the stagecoach departed, Rachel found herself in the unprecedented situation of being alone with Wade Valentine. Despite their frequent interactions in Silverton, they had always been in public or professional settings. Now, with at least 2 days of waiting ahead, she felt suddenly self-conscious. Wade seemed to sense her discomfort. "I've business to attend to with the freight master about securing our place in line once the bridge is repaired. Perhaps you'd like to rest after the early rising." Rachel seized the suggestion gratefully. "Yes, I believe I will. Thank you, Mr. Valentine." The enforced idleness of waiting proved less awkward than Rachel had feared. The way station maintained a small lending library of dog-eared books, providing welcome distraction. Wade spent much of the first day assisting with bridge repairs, returning mud-spattered but satisfied with the progress. "Another day should see it sufficiently reinforced for our wagon," he reported over a simple dinner of stew and biscuits. "The station manager has offered use of his private sitting room this evening, if you'd care for more comfortable surroundings than the common area." The small room, with its worn but clean furnishings, offered welcome privacy from the increasingly crowded way station as more travelers were forced to halt their journeys. "I confess I'm eager to return to Silverton," Rachel said as they settled before the small fire. I find myself missing my students. Wade smiled. They've certainly taken to you. Young Billy Peterson informed me very seriously that you know everything worth knowing and some things that ain't. Rachel laughed. Billy has a colorful way of expressing himself. He's quite bright, though his spelling leaves something to be desired. You've made a difference already, Wade said, his expression sobering. Not just with the children. The whole town has lifted somehow since your arrival. The sincerity in his voice touched her. That's kind of you to say, though I suspect the arrival of spring deserves more credit than I. Don't underestimate your impact. Silverton was a mining camp slowly evolving into a town. You've accelerated that transition by providing something essential for families to put down roots. You speak as though you've given this considerable thought, Rachel observed. Wade stared into the fire. I came to Colorado with nothing after the war, built everything from scratch. But a man eventually wants more than material success. He glanced up, meeting her eyes. A community worth belonging to. Children playing in streets. A future beyond the next silver strike or cattle drive. The vulnerability in his expression stirred something deep within her. Over their weeks of acquaintance, she'd come to respect Wade Valentine's strength and integrity. But this glimpse of his deeper yearnings revealed dimensions she hadn't anticipated. Is that why you've invested so much in Silverton's development? Not just for business reasons, but to build community. Partly, he acknowledged, though I'll admit my motives weren't entirely altruistic initially. I recognized Silverton's potential early good water, defensible position, rich mining prospects. But as it grew, my vision expanded. He paused. When I saw you standing alone at that train platform, something told me you were exactly what Silverton needed. A stranded schoolteacher? Rachel teased, deflecting the sudden intensity. His mouth curved slightly. A woman of intelligence, courage, and conviction. Someone who could help shape what Silverton might become. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as the evening progressed. But Rachel found herself revisiting Wade's words as she prepared for bed in her small private room. His vision for Silverton aligned remarkably with her own emerging hopes, a true community rather than merely a place to reside temporarily. The bridge repairs were completed by midday the following day, allowing them to resume their journey. Wade insisted Rachel ride in the wagon's seat beside him rather than with the cargo, though the arrangement meant close quarters that tested her composure. His physical presence, the breadth of his shoulders, the strength evident in his handling of the team, the faint scent of soap and leather that surrounded him made her acutely aware of him as a man rather than merely a community benefactor. They made good time until mid-afternoon, when dark clouds gathered with alarming speed over the mountain passes ahead. We need shelter, Wade decided, eyeing the threatening sky. There's an old line shack about a mile ahead, not much, but it'll keep us dry. The storm broke just as they reached the small structure, a crude but solid shelter used by cowboys during cattle drives. Wade unhitched the horses and secured them in the lean-to at one side while Rachel hurried inside with their personal belongings. The interior was Spartan, a small iron stove, rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and a narrow cot but intact and dry. Rachel busied herself clearing dust from surfaces while Wade brought in firewood and supplies. It's not the Occidental Hotel, he said apologetically as he kindled a fire in the stove, but it'll see us through the storm. I'm merely grateful for solid walls and a roof, Rachel replied, watching as rain began lashing the single small window. How long do these mountain storms typically last? Hard to predict. Could clear by morning or linger for days. He arranged their provisions on the table. We have plenty of supplies regardless. As darkness fell and the storm intensified, Rachel became increasingly aware of their isolation and proximity. The line shack's confines meant they were never more than a few feet apart. Wade seemed equally conscious of the situation, maintaining scrupulous courtesy and offering her the cot while he prepared a bedroll near the stove. "I don't imagine either of us anticipated these circumstances," he said as they shared a simple meal of jerky, hard bread, and coffee. "I apologize if it causes difficulties upon our return." Rachel considered this. People will talk regardless of circumstances. I've learned that trying to manage others' perceptions is largely futile. "A philosophical perspective," Wade observed, "though practical considerations remain. Your position as schoolteacher requires community respect. Are you suggesting my reputation will be irreparably damaged?" Rachel challenged, a hint of fire entering her voice. "That seems rather provincial thinking for a man of your worldliness." Wade's eyebrows rose at her spirit. "Not at all. I'm suggesting that I should offer marriage upon our return, to silence wagging tongues." Rachel nearly choked on her coffee. "Marriage? Mr. Valentine, that's absurd." His expression remained serious. "Is it? We're well suited in temperament and goals. You care deeply for Silverton's development, as do I. You've demonstrated remarkable adaptability to frontier life, and I believe there's mutual respect between us." He paused, adding quietly, "Perhaps something more." "This is hardly a romantic proposal," Rachel managed, heart pounding erratically. "I'm a practical man," Wade replied. "But if you require romance." He set aside his cup and moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hand in his. "Rachel Flannery, from the moment I saw you standing alone at that train platform, something in me recognized you not just as Silverton's missing piece, but as my own. I've watched you build a life from nothing these past weeks, with courage and grace that humbles me. I find myself thinking of you at odd moments, wondering your opinion on matters large and small. I believe we could build something exceptional together, not just for Silverton, but for ourselves." The sincerity in his eyes stole Rachel's breath. This was no mere practical arrangement he was proposing, despite his initial framing. "Wade," she said softly, using his given name for the first time, "this is unexpected." "Is it really?" he asked. "Haven't you felt the connection between us developing? The way conversations flow easily, the shared vision for what might be." She had, though she'd attributed it to professional compatibility rather than allowing herself to consider romantic possibilities. Wade Valentine was Silverton's most prominent citizen, while she was an accidental resident still finding her footing. "I need time," she said finally. "This isn't a decision to make hastily, especially under these unusual circumstances." Wade nodded, rising to his feet though he maintained gentle hold of her hand. "Of course, I wouldn't want a response born of situation rather than genuine feeling." He released her hand reluctantly. "But know that my proposal stands regardless of your answer. I believe we belong together, Rachel. The train left you at the wrong station, but I don't believe it was a mistake." Sleep proved elusive that night as Rachel lay on the narrow cot, listening to the storm's fury and the occasional shifting of Wade's large frame on his bedroll. His proposal replayed in her mind not just his words, but the emotion behind them. She'd come west seeking independence and purpose, not marriage. Yet the life Wade outlined partnership in building something meaningful, backed by mutual respect and growing affection, appealed to her on levels she hadn't anticipated. Morning brought clearing skies and the awkwardness of close quarters in daylight. They maintained careful courtesy as they prepared to resume their journey, neither mentioning the previous night's conversation. The remainder of the trip passed without further incident, though Rachel was acutely aware of Wade's presence beside her on the wagon seat. What had previously felt like comfortable companionship now carried undercurrents of unresolved tension and possibility. As they approached Silverton late in the afternoon, Rachel braced herself for the town's reaction to their delayed return without Mrs. Jenkins. To her surprise, they were greeted not with suspicion but with relief and excitement about the educational supplies they brought. Mrs. Jenkins explained everything, Martha Wilson assured her as women gathered to help unload the precious books. "We were just worried about you both, with the storms and all." While the ladies fussed over Rachel, checking she'd suffered no ill effects from the journey, several men assisted Wade with the heavier cargo. The atmosphere was one of community celebration rather than scandal, a response that touched Rachel deeply. Dr. Jenkins approached as the unloading concluded. "Miss Flannery, I hope you'll join us for dinner this evening. My wife is eager to hear about the remainder of your journey, and we have several town matters to discuss." Dinner at the Jenkinses' comfortable home proved to be a carefully orchestrated community affair. In addition to Rachel and Wade, the mayor and his wife, the banker, and two prominent mine owners and their spouses were present. Conversation flowed easily, touching on Denver's development, mining prospects, and increasingly Silverton's future needs. "The school's expansion is just the beginning," Mayor Tompkins declared. "With more families arriving monthly, we need proper planning. Streets, water systems, perhaps even telegraph service eventually. All achievable with proper coordination," Wade agreed. "Though maintaining Silverton's character as a community rather than just a mining outpost should remain central to planning." As discussion continued, Rachel noticed how naturally Wade included her perspective, drawing her into conversations about civic development and deferring to her expertise regarding educational needs. They functioned as partners in the exchange, their views complementary despite occasional differences in approach. Walking home under a canopy of stars, Rachel found herself contemplating this new dimension of their relationship. Wade had escorted her, of course propriety demanded it, especially given recent circumstances, but there was an ease between them that transcended conventional courtesy. At her door, Wade paused. "I meant what I said in the line shack, Rachel. Take all the time you need to consider, but know my feelings remain unchanged." "I've been thinking about little else," she admitted. "But I need to be certain any decision comes from clear-headed assessment, not complicated circumstances." His smile was gentle in the moonlight. "Understood. Though I'll warn you, I can be persistent when pursuing something I believe in." He lifted her hand to his lips, the gesture respectful yet charged with possibility. "Good night, Rachel." The following weeks brought a return to routine, yet everything felt subtly different. School resumed with enthusiasm from students eager to utilize the new books and materials. Rachel threw herself into teaching, expanding the curriculum now that proper resources were available. Wade maintained his regular visits to the school, though with careful propriety that acknowledged their uncertain status. Silverton's development accelerated as spring advanced. New buildings rose along the main street, including a proper dressmaker's shop that meant Rachel could finally expand her limited wardrobe. The mine owners, influenced by Wade's advocacy, established a fund for community improvements, beginning with wooden sidewalks to combat the mud of melting snow. Through it all, Rachel found herself increasingly integrated into Silverton's fabric. Women sought her opinion on community matters. Miners' wives invited her to social gatherings. Children brought her wildflowers and interesting rocks discovered during their explorations. What had begun as an accidental destination was becoming home in ways Pittsburgh and Circleville never had. Wade remained a steady presence, neither pressuring for an answer to his proposal nor withdrawing his attention. They developed a comfortable rhythm of interaction: school visits, community meetings, occasional meals at the hotel restaurant. Townspeople observed their growing closeness with approval rather than censure, seeming to consider them a natural pairing. On a warm Saturday in late May, Wade appeared at Rachel's door with an unexpected invitation. "I'd like to show you something if you can spare the afternoon," he said. It's about 8 miles outside town. Curiosity piqued. Rachel agreed, changing quickly into her sturdiest skirt and boots. Wade had brought horses, his own chestnut stallion and a gentle mare for Rachel. "I didn't realize you rode," he commented as she mounted with practiced ease. "My father kept horses before his business troubles," Rachel explained. Riding was one of few pleasures that remained when finances grew strained. They traveled north of town, following a well-maintained trail that wound through aspen groves and meadows bright with spring wildflowers. The day was perfect, clear skies, gentle breeze, temperature warm but not oppressive. Rachel felt tensions she hadn't realized she carried melting away with each mile. Wade was an attentive companion, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of the region's history. His knowledge of the land impressed her, not just practical information about water sources and terrain, but appreciation for its beauty and character. Eventually, they crested a small rise, and Wade reined his horse to a stop. Before them stretched a verdant valley, sheltered by mountains on 3 sides. A substantial log house stood near a clear stream, surrounded by outbuildings and corrals where cattle grazed peacefully. "Valentine Ranch," Wade said, a note of pride in his voice. "My home." Rachel took in the scene with appreciation. "It's beautiful, Wade. So different from what I imagined." "What did you imagine?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Something grander, perhaps. More imposing, like your presence in town." She smiled to soften the observation. Wade laughed. "I leave ostentation to men like Blackwell. This suits my needs: comfortable, practical, connected to the land." He gestured toward the valley. 2,000 acres of good grazing land, water rights secured, timber for building and fuel. Everything a man needs. "Except family," Rachel noted softly. "Yes," he agreed, meeting her eyes. "Except that." They rode down into the valley, where Wade showed her the ranch operations with obvious pride. The main house proved larger than it appeared from a distance: 6 rooms built of squared logs, with a wide porch wrapping 2 sides. The interior was masculine but comfortable, with quality furnishings that reflected their owner's taste for durability over ornamentation. "My mother would appreciate your practical sensibilities," Rachel remarked as they toured the house. "She always said a home should be livable, not just for display." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Wade replied. "Did she share your love of education?" "Very much so. She taught me at home until I was 12. Then insisted I attend a proper girls' academy despite financial constraints." Rachel smiled at the memory. She sold her pearl earrings, her only valuable possession, to pay the first year's tuition. "A worthwhile investment, clearly," Wade said, "though I imagine she'd be surprised to find her daughter teaching in a Colorado mining town." "Surprised but not disappointed, I think. She believed education was a calling, not merely an occupation." They continued through the house, ending in a cozy study lined with bookshelves. Rachel examined the titles with surprise: classics of literature alongside practical manuals on ranching, mining, and business. "You're an eclectic reader," she observed. "Books were scarce in my youth," Wade replied. "I learned to value any printed material I could acquire. Later, when circumstances improved, I indulged my curiosity across subjects." Rachel selected a volume of Wordsworth, opening to a passage marked with a faded ribbon. "You enjoy poetry? Is that so surprising?" A hint of defensiveness colored his tone. "Not surprising," she corrected gently. "Illuminating. You present such a practical exterior to the world, yet here's evidence of romantic sensibilities." Wade took the book from her hands, replacing it carefully on the shelf. "Perhaps I simply recognize beauty where I find it." His gaze held hers steadily. The moments stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities, until Wade finally broke the connection. Are you hungry? Mrs. Garcia, my housekeeper, left food before visiting her daughter in town. They shared a simple but delicious meal on the porch, watching as afternoon light gilded the valley. Rachel found herself imagining life in this peaceful setting, mornings spent teaching in town, evenings here in conversation and companionable silence with Wade. The vision was unexpectedly compelling. "Why did you bring me here today?" she asked finally. Wade considered the question before answering. "I wanted you to see this part of my life. In town, I'm primarily a businessman and civic leader. Here, I'm simply a man who's built something he values." He paused. "And I suppose I hoped seeing it might help you envision a possible future." The honesty of his response touched her. "It's a beautiful place, Wade. Any woman would be fortunate to call it home." "I'm not interested in any woman," he said quietly. "Just you." The directness of his statement demanded equal honesty. "I've grown to care for you deeply these past months," Rachel admitted. "Your intelligence, your integrity, your vision for Silverton's future all resonate with my own values. But marriage is a lifetime commitment, not to be entered lightly." "What concerns remain?" Wade asked. "Speak freely, Rachel." She gathered her thoughts. "I came west seeking independence to build a life on my own terms after years of family obligations and financial constraints. Marriage traditionally means surrendering that independence." "Not necessarily," Wade countered. "Not with the right partner." "I admire your independence, Rachel. I'd never ask you to abandon teaching or your community involvement. There's also the matter of children," she continued. "Teaching other people's children is one thing. Having my own would necessarily change my professional commitments. A bridge to cross together if and when that blessing occurs," Wade said. "With resources for household help and your natural organizational abilities, compromises could be found." His reasoned responses to her concerns reflected the thoughtfulness she'd come to value in him. This wasn't a man who made empty promises or failed to consider practical realities. "You've given this considerable thought," she observed. "I've had little else occupying my mind since proposing," he admitted wryly. "Though I've tried not to press you for an answer." Rachel smiled at his restraint. "I've appreciated the space to consider carefully. It speaks well of your respect for my decision-making." As afternoon turned to evening, they reluctantly prepared to return to town. Before mounting their horses, Wade took Rachel's hands in his. "I don't ask for an answer today," he said. "But know that my offer stands not just of marriage, but of partnership in all things. Whatever you decide, I'll respect your choice." The ride back to Silverton was quieter, both lost in thought as twilight settled over the landscape. At Rachel's door, Wade bid her good night with customary courtesy, though the warmth in his eyes conveyed deeper sentiment. Alone in her small house, Rachel found her thoughts dominated by the day's experiences. The ranch had revealed new dimensions to Wade's character: his appreciation for beauty, his connection to the land, the thoughtful creation of a home that awaited only family to complete it. More significantly, his responses to her concerns demonstrated understanding of her needs and values in ways few men would consider. The school term concluded in mid-June with a community celebration showcasing student achievements. Parents beamed with pride as children recited poetry, demonstrated mathematical skills, and displayed carefully crafted maps and essays. Rachel watched with satisfaction, acutely aware of the progress made in just a few months. Wade attended, of course, standing at the back of the crowded schoolroom with other town leaders. His presence had become so natural that Rachel barely registered it as unusual until Martha Wilson commented while helping serve refreshments afterward. "Mr. Valentine never attended school functions before you came," she observed. "Now he's at every one, watching you as much as the children." Rachel felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been instrumental in the school's development." It's natural he'd take interest in its progress. Martha's knowing smile was infuriating. Of course, that's all it is. Just as his twice-weekly visits to check on building maintenance are purely practical. She patted Rachel's arm. We all see how it is between you two, and approve wholeheartedly. Silverton needs more permanent families, especially ones that care about its development the way you both do. The conversation left Rachel unsettled, not because Martha's observations were inaccurate, but because they highlighted how central Wade had become to her life in Silverton. His support of her educational initiatives, his companionship during community events, his steady presence when difficulties arose all had become integral to her experience. The prospect of continuing without these elements seemed increasingly hollow. That evening, as twilight settled over the town, Rachel made her decision. Independence mattered, yes, but not at the expense of partnership with someone who genuinely valued her contributions and character. Wade Valentine offered not subjugation but complementary strength, not limitation but expanded possibility. She found him at the hotel restaurant, dining alone with documents spread beside his plate. He looked up as she approached, surprise and pleasure lighting his features. "Rachel, I didn't expect to see you this evening after the school festivities. May I join you?" she asked, suddenly nervous despite her resolve. "Of course." He quickly gathered his papers to make space. Once seated, Rachel found her carefully planned words evaporating. Instead, she reached across the table to take his hand. "Yes," she said simply. Wade's expression shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "Yes." "To your proposal," she clarified. "I've considered everything carefully, and my answer is yes, Wade Valentine. I would be honored to become your wife." Joy transformed his features, erasing the weathered lines of responsibility and concern. He raised her hand to his lips, the gesture both reverent and possessive. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado Territory," he said, voice rough with emotion. "When?" "Soon," Rachel replied, smiling at his eagerness. Though propriety suggests a proper engagement period. 2 weeks, he suggested immediately. Rachel laughed. "A month, at least. The school term has just ended, and there are matters to organize." They compromised on 3 weeks' time, enough for necessary preparations, but not so long as to strain Wade's patience. The news spread quickly through Silverton, met with universal approval and immediate offers of assistance from the town ladies. The wedding took place on a perfect July morning, with wildflowers decorating the small church and sunshine streaming through simple glass windows. Rachel wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver, while Wade cut a magnificent figure in a new black suit that emphasized his powerful build. The entire town attended, with children from the school singing a blessing as the couple departed the church. The celebration continued at Valentine Ranch, transformed for the occasion with tables set beneath cottonwood trees and lanterns strung between branches. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, Rachel found a quiet moment with her new husband away from well-wishers. "Happy?" Wade asked, his arms secure around her waist. "Completely," she assured him. "Though I confess, it's still sometimes difficult to believe how we came to this moment." "The train left you at the wrong station," Wade reminded her, turning her to face him fully. "But there are no mistakes in love." The phrase that had puzzled her months ago now seemed prophetic. Had the train continued to Circleville as intended, she would never have known this man, this community, this fulfilling life that had opened before her. "Your mother's wisdom continues to guide you," Rachel observed, reaching up to touch his face. "I wish I could have known her." "She would have adored you," Wade said with certainty. Strong, principled women recognize each other's worth across generations. As their guests called for them to return, Rachel tilted her face up for his kiss, brief but full of promise for the privacy that would soon be theirs. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Rachel continued teaching, establishing Silverton School as the finest in the county. Wade expanded his business interests while maintaining his commitment to the town's development. Together, they built a life that balanced individual pursuits with shared vision. Their first child, William, arrived a year after their marriage, a robust boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined intelligence. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later, completing their family. Rachel found that Wade had been right with his support and resources. She managed both motherhood and teaching by adjusting schedules and accepting help where needed. Silverton grew steadily, becoming the prosperous community they had envisioned. The arrival of the railroad in 1882 accelerated development, bringing new residents and commercial opportunities. Through economic fluctuations and occasional conflicts, the town maintained its character as a place where families could thrive rather than merely a mining outpost. On their 10th anniversary, Wade surprised Rachel with an addition to the ranch house, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable reading nooks for family gatherings. The centerpiece was a framed photograph of the Silverton train platform where they'd first met. "Still believe the train left you at the wrong station?" he asked as they stood together admiring the completed room. Rachel leaned into his embrace, watching through the window as their children played in the summer twilight. "No," she said softly. "I'm exactly where I was meant to be." And in that moment, surrounded by the life they'd built together, secure in love that had grown deeper with each passing year, Rachel knew with absolute certainty that her long-ago misfortune had been destiny in disguise. The train had indeed left her at the wrong station, but it had delivered her to exactly the right life.